Hello, year three, Alder, and welcome back. Right, so by now we've done quite a few different lessons, and now we're going to be moving in our timetable onto our maths lesson. Now, I know from Mr. Foster that earlier on in the week you were looking at, I believe, was it the 8 times table, showing that in lots of different ways. And then I think you then went on to division within the 8 times table. So in today's lesson, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at developing our fluency within the 8 times table. So it's going to be practicing our times tables in some different ways. And I've got a couple of strategies which I want you to have a go at using if you ever get stuck when it comes to your times tables. Right, as we always do, let's now move on to our slides so I can show you exactly what we're talking about here. Okay. Right, I sure do hope you can see that. Okay, so as you can see from the learning intention today, our learning intention is to know my 8 times tables. Okay, so we've got our warm-up activity first. Now have a go at doing this because I know you've done some bits with the 8 times table with different arrays and different representations. So starting off, we've got 3 questions just to get you warmed up. The first one, you've got some pictures here, some trays with some delicious looking cakes on. Question to you. How many cakes? A couple of different ways that you could do this. You can count them. That might take quite a while though. If you know your 8 times tables, you might be able to count them in 8s, or you could perhaps do that as repeated addition. Next, we've got write a multiplication equation to represent the apples. Now for this, I want you to think back to the groups. Maybe rather than thinking about bags of apples, perhaps think of the number of groups of apples. And then also think, how many groups are there? There are so many groups with so many apples in each group. What could that be as a multiplication equation? And then finally, a little bit of practice there. And you might not be able to finish this one if you're not so sure about your 8 times table, but you can maybe give it a go. And we've got a number track here. We've got 8, 16, 24, ooh, gaps. Have a look at that pattern, see if you can think what the next thing could be and what those gaps are going to be. So as per normal, I would like you to pause here. And after you pause, I would like you to go away and have a go at answering these questions. And then when you're ready to come back, press play and we're going to find out what the answers are. Okay, pause now. And we're back. Okay, so let's see what you were able to do with these questions. Right, okay, so if we're thinking about those cakes, as you can see on each tray, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we have 3 trays of 8. 3 trays of 8, 3 groups of 8. So we could say that was going to be 8 times 3. 8, 16, 24. Again, perhaps you did that by doing 8 plus 8 plus 8. There are a couple of different ways that you could have had a go at solving that. Next, write a multiplication equation to represent the apples. Okay, so thinking about that here, we have how many groups of apples? Well, we have 8 groups of apples. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And how many is in each group? Well, we have 3. So you could perhaps present that as 8 times 3. Perhaps you did it in a different way and did it as 3 times 8. And finally, we have our number track here as well. And with our number track, we were essentially looking at adding 8 each time. And we're going to practice this in a moment, but what we should have had is something like 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, 64, 72, 80, 88, and 96. And that brings us from 8 times 1 all the way up to 8 times 12. I hope you did well there. And if you didn't, don't worry. Okay, there's plenty of chances to practice and you can always go back and perhaps practice a little bit later. Okay, next up. So getting to know our 8 times table. So next, I know you guys have been multiplying and you've been dividing by 8. So we're just going to be practicing counting in multiples of 8 today. And I think, aha, here we go. Perfect, just what I was looking for. So as we're practicing in multiples of 8 today, I wanted to just bring back that little chart, that little grid, so we can just practice it a little bit. We'll do a little bit of chanting, a bit of my turn, your turn, and then we're going to go backwards and forwards and just get into the flow of that. So starting with 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, 64, 72, 80, 88, 96. Okay. Now, as I've got that up there, we've got these, and they're all essentially multiples of 8. So you've got 1 times 8, or 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3, 8 times 4, 8 times 5, etc., etc. So, a bit of a challenge for you now. I'm going to read out some number sentences, and I want you to see if you can note down what you think the times table would be. So, the first one. Again, pause if you need a little bit of extra time to work them out. So, starting off with 8 times 2. I think 8 times 2 would be here. Note it down. Okay. Pause if you need extra time, but if you are ready, we should have 8 times 2 is equal to 16. Okay, let's do another one. Let's go for, how about 8 times 10? 8 times 10. Have a think of that. How can you do it? Pause the video if you need some extra time. 8 times 10 is equal to 80. Okay. 8 times 10 is equal to 80. Again, maybe use your chart here this time. What do you think 8 times 9 is? 8 times 9. Have a think. Pause the video if you need some time. If you're ready, 8 times 9 should be equal to 72. Now, how did you work that out? Did you perhaps use our little chart here? Perhaps you found 8 times 10 and you went back one. Perhaps you subtracted 8 from 8 times 10. There are many, many different ways that we could do this. And that links us to one of the strategies I wanted to show you today, because sometimes learning a new times table can be really quite tricky. And actually, we don't have to get it straight away. We can practice it and we can get a little bit more fluent and a bit better at it. But sometimes these things take time, and sometimes it's actually really handy to have another strategy that you can use to help you with your 8 times table. So I've got a bit of an example for you here. If we had 10 times 8 and we know that that's 80, perhaps that can help you work out what 11 times 8 is going to be, because you could just add 8 more. Because you know with our 8 times tables, it's just groups of 8. So each time when you go through those different multiples, they are adding 8, because there's 8 extra groups. So we can go from 10 times 8 is 80 to 11 times 8 is 88, because we can do 80 plus 8. Now, there's a bit of a challenge for you here. I wanted to see if you can get your head around this and see if you can give it a go. So I've written out some 8 times tables there. We've got 8 times 5 is 40, 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 8 is 64. And with that, I wanted you to have a little bit of a go to see if you can then figure out what the next question would be. So if 8 times 5 is 40, what could 8 times 6 be? See if you can remember that strategy, which we just talked about. And I'm now going to give you a couple of minutes to work those out, and I'll reveal the answers afterwards. So you might want to pause the video here. And if you wanted an extra challenge, which other 8 times tables can you work out? Are there any related facts? Can we go even bigger? Could we do 8 times 100? Are there any kind of similarities or things that we can use that we already know to help us work out some bigger questions? Okay, pause the video here, and when you're ready to come back, press play. Okay, right, back into it. So I hope you were able to use that strategy we just talked about. So remember, what we wanted to do was, if we know what 8 times 5 is, then if we wanted to figure out what 8 times 6 is, what we could do is we could add an extra 8. So what you should have is 8 times 6 is 48. 8 times 3, which is this question here, is then going to be 24, so that's 16 plus 8. And then 8 times 9 is going to be 72, because we have 64 plus 8, which is then going to give us 8 times 9 if we know what 8 times 8 is. Okay, I hope you were successful there, but again, don't worry if you were not, you can always go back and you can try this again. Okay, so gone through those bits, and now I'm going to set you off on your independent activity. So Your independent activity here is I put down a couple of different 8 times tables here. And I know previously when you were doing your 8 times tables, you were working them out in lots of different ways and you're also able to show them. So I would like you to have a go at answering the questions, but I'd also like to see if you can show them in an array. And as a bit of an extra challenge there, I would like to see if there are any other ways that you could show it. And as a bit of an extra challenge, I would like to see if you can create a rule for the 8 times tables. When you're looking at the 8 times tables, is there anything that is the same each time? Are there any kind of commonalities that you can actually kind of build upon there? And once you've done that, perhaps you could create a bit of a rule. So something like the 8 times table will always have this, or to work something out in the 8 times table, you can do this. And see if you can use that rule to then solve some of these questions here. So I've got 19 times 8. That's something that's way off our chart. Now, if we can work out a range of other questions, can we work out something like 19 times 8? I'm going to pause it there now. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you produce. If that's your answers to the questions, but also seeing if I can see some of those lovely arrays as well. And remember to send them in. And if you wanted to answer these questions now, I would pause the video. And then remember to email everything in to the year group email address. I look forward to seeing what you all produce. Okay, bye-bye.